Hello and welcome to episode 19 of my series as I build through the terrain tutorials in Battle Games in Middle-earth magazine. This time round we're entering Moria and the subject is dwarven mines. So there's a couple of different builds that I'm going to do. You're going to do the actual mine facings, some mine tooling and other bits and pieces, maybe a bridge or two. And I'm really looking forward to this. It's going to be a palette cleanser after the epic last time, which just turned into something incredibly stupidly big. So without any further ado, let's point the camera down, have a look at the magazine and see exactly what it is we're going to make. So then here we are, dwarven mines. For centuries the dwarves carved their living from the very rock that was their home. Their delving created the vast caverns and tunnels that now hide the goblin hordes. In this modelling workshop we will show you how to make the abandoned derelict mines of Moria. So what they're saying that you need to bring is expanded polystyrene, a felt tip pen, a craft knife and clippers, a hot wire cutter, PVA glue, modelling stone and gravel, textured paints, acrylic paints, balsa wood, super glue and jewellery chain. Now I've got all of that but jewellery chain, but I can pick some of that up, I'm sure. And as I've said in the intro, there's a couple of different types of build. First of all, we've got mine facings, which is what I'll start very, very shortly. And then we've got mine workings, which is going to be quite good fun. And then they've got another section called other constructions. And actually, I'm going to try and do at least one thing from each of these different official builds. Now, I'm not totally sure whether I'm going to do an advanced build or not. I have got some ideas, but I might just stick to what's here and just try to make at least one of everything. So really go to town on the mine workings and that sort of thing. But we'll see how it goes. I've got a month to go, so yeah, we'll see if I run out of time and how I'm feeling. But a shorter video I feel will be quite beneficial. So anyway, I will gather together my materials and then we will start off with mine facings, part 1, the base level. I got my microphone fair out of the way early in this video, so for some reason I didn't turn it on. What we're doing here is step 1, mine facings, which is the base level. To make a mine facing, you will need a sheet of expanded polystyrene. The sheet should be big enough to build all your mine facings and thick enough to look impressive. We purchased a sheet approximately 240 by 60 centimeters and about 5 centimeters thick. To create the base level, use a craft knife to draw a diagonal line across one corner of the polystyrene sheet, forming a big triangle. Then snap the polystyrene along the score. Snapping the sheet like this will give you enough room to get a hot wire cutter in. Next, draw a winding line with a marker pen so that it runs near to the snapped edge. Finally, cut along this line with the hot wire cutter. So I'm about to do basically that. I do a slightly different technique, but you can see that by watching. So yeah, there we are. Now with the mic on, so I cut that and that worked very well. So what I'm now going to do is use the Proxon, like I say, to cut along the wavy edge that I drew. So let's get that done. There we are, so we have the shape. So what it now says is to slope the edge. Given the polystyrene a slope on its edge is quite simple once you get the hang of it. Cut along the edge again with a hot wire cutter, this time angle the wire to cut out a wedge shape and create a steep slope. So I could try and do this potentially with the Proxon, so I'm going to give it a go, and if it doesn't work then I will get my, actually I'm not going to try it with the Proxon, I'm going to go and get my hot wire foam cutters and we'll do it with that. The next step is about sloping the edge, so let me read to you what it says. Giving the polystyrene a slope on its edge is quite simple once you get the hang of it. Cut along the edge again with a hot wire cutter, this time angle the wire to cut out a wedge shape and create a steep slope. So I'm not going to be able to use the Proxon for that, however I've got my hot wire foam factory cutter here, which is okay. It probably needs to have itself tightened up slightly. It's been a bit loose recently, this, so let's get that done. There we go, make that a little bit tighter, that's better. So yeah, so I'll make use of this now to cut that bevel in. I do like these tools, they are very, very reliable. I've found them to be really, really good. We have a beveled edge. So let's go on to the next step. So Step 3 is the second level. The second level will look very similar to the base level, only smaller. To work out how much smaller to make it, you can use the base level as a guide. Place the base level onto the polystyrene sheet and draw around it. If you place the base level so that one of its straight edges is flush with the edge of the sheet, you will save yourself some needless cutting later on. That's good advice. Once you have placed the duplicate shape on the polystyrene sheet, draw another wavy line parallel to the first, only about 10 centimetres further in. Score and snap the styrene sheet if you need to, and then cut along the second wavy line with a hot wire cutter exactly as you did before. When it is cut, create a slope in the same way again. And step 4 is the third level. So what I'm going to do is I'll quickly do this on camera, and then I will get it beveled and do the third level off camera because it's just going to be repeated. So you can see that what I've done is I've turned this upside down. The sheet underneath is what's going to be the second level. And I'm drawing my way through, drawing around the edge of the template. So the first cut I'm going to do is going to be the one that's the hardest, trying to keep this straight. Because I don't have a straight edge, I can't really even use a guide. So I'm just going to have to try to be accurate. This may not work. So now what we'll do is I will now draw a wavy line as it suggests along here. So let's get that done. And finally, I will get the other hot wire cutter and I will bevel it. So I'm going to do that, and I'll do the other levels, and then I'll bring you back for the step after that. There we are, we've got 3 levels. You can see that I've done something a bit different here. I very, very strongly wanted to have a bridge section in, so I'm going to damage this up a little bit, but I want this to be like an archway which is stepping out from that bit of the level, and I can maybe put a ladder up there as well. I just think it makes it look a little bit more interesting. I will damage and knock that around a bit. That's not part of the tutorial, that's just my added addition. The next step, which is step 5, which is mine entrances. To make the mine entrances, use a hot wire cutter to cut door shapes out of the front of each level. Angle the cutter to create an overhang that gives some depth to the entrance. Cut at least one entrance in each level to give the impression this was once a busy mine. Once the mine entrances have been cut, use PVA glue to stick the levels one on top of the other. So what we'll do is we'll mark some mine entrances, and you can see that we should probably have one here. So let's think about doing that about there. Maybe a bit bigger, but that'll do. Let's do one in front of this bridge where the bridge is going to be. So let's do one here. And finally, let's do a couple on the ground floor, on the bottom. So we'll do one here, and we'll do one here. So let's move this out of the way and push it to the back. And get, again, the hot wire cutter. This time what we're going to do is we're going to push it in so it's got a loop like that. And that will allow us to come along and cut out an entrance like so. So when that's painted black, that will have some nice depth to it. I'm pleased with that. Nice rocky entrance. So what I'll do is I will carry that process out for that door, and that door, and then I'll bring you back in a second. So there we are, you can see that we've got our doorways in, and the bridge is now trimmed as well, very slightly. So what I'm going to do now is glue it together. Now it says to use PVA glue, so PVA glue we're going to use, but I am going to add something to it. I'm going to use cocktail sticks just to strengthen each of the joins, just to give it a little bit more solidity, particularly on this bridge here. So to do that, what you do is you just grab yourself a cocktail stick and you shove it in. And then when you put it in place, you can be confident that that's going to be a stronger join. Now in this case, I actually need to put a cocktail stick there as well. So what I can do for that one is I can come in at an angle and push that in like that also, and then I can either push it all the way in or clip it off when I come to when it's done. So that's how you use cocktail sticks for making your terrain more solid. Most of this probably won't need cocktail sticks. What we'll do is we'll put a good amount of PVA on. Grab a brush and just spread that out, and then do each level and then weight it down. So I'll get that done, and then we'll leave this for a bit. This has been very quick getting to this stage, and I'll bring you back when we come to the next step, when it's all dry, which will probably not be now till tomorrow. But yeah, been very quick so far. So just like that, and then drop it on top, and then I'll weight it all down. When it's all done, I'll put weights on and get each level all secure. So I'll get that completed and I'll bring you along for the next step very shortly. This is dried, it's only taken a couple of hours, which is quite cool. So now we're going to move on to step 6, which is adding texture. You can create a somewhat rough and rocky appearance to your mine, more than textured paint alone could achieve. Paint patches of PVA glue all over the mine facings and pour on modelling sand and gravel. You could stick some larger pieces of stone down too. Once all that is dry, give the whole piece a good coat of textured paint. So my textured paint I do by painting on my terrain paint, which you can find a video to in the description below, and then sprinkling sand. So what I'm going to do on this is I'm going to get PVA, and I've got a big bucket which is just had a shot here, which has some big lumps that I pick up off my back bank, and I also have my buckets which have my sifted sand in, so I'm going to get some of those bigger ones. And what I'm going to do, I'm not going to put down builder's sand number 1 because that will come in as my texture, but I'm going to grab builder's sand number 4 and number 3, and I'm going to come in areas, paint it in and glue the sand into place, or they're actually small pebbles. So I'll get that done, I'll put some music on for you, and you can watch as I go through this. It's a very simple process. I'll do one bit and then the rest so yeah, you just slop some PVA in like that, get your brush and spread it out. Like that. So we'll have a little bit of texture there, and then just out of shot I've got my textured sand number 4, which is the largest, so we'll chuck a load of that in, maybe not quite that much, like that, and then we'll come over the top with some textured sand number 3, which is the next smallest, which is nearly the same size but not quite. So we'll literally do that, and when that's dry then we can obviously paint it as it says, and then also what I'll be doing is picking some bigger bits out and slotting them in to look like proper fallen rocks, so like that. Simple as that. So I'll do the rest of the build and you can watch. I'll put some music on. Right then, this is now dry and I've shaken the loose off. So what I'm going to do, I've put some paper down for this step. I've got some black terrain paint, which is normal paint mixed with water and PVA. And at the back here, I've got my sifted sand from the back bank. Now, I normally use actual builder's sand, which doesn't have quite as fine a grain. But for this, I've decided I'm going to go for that, which is a very, very fine sand. Let me just show that to you. It's almost a dust, as you can see, so it's a very, very fine sand, and that will give me a really, really fine texture. So I won't talk you through all of this, but I'll basically show you what I'm going to do. What I'm going to be doing is painting my terrain paint on, and this brush is a bit stiff, so just give me a second to loosen it. So what we're going to do is going to come along with the terrain paint, paint it on over everything, including the previous texture, because that will give it a nice base. And then when I've done a little bit, and I won't be doing too much at once because I want to stay quite in control of this, so I'll just come round to the back here, then I will scatter the sand over it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the flat planes first, let them dry, and then turn it on its back and do the front of the cliffs as well. So that's how I'm going to do that. So I'll get this done and I'll show you what it looks like when it's completed and we're ready for the next step. So it's as simple as that, and then come along and scatter the dust on top. So there we are, that's how that'll work. So I'll bring you along when I've done the whole thing, when it's dry, and I'm ready to do the next step. Next up, this is dry, so next up what we're going to do is we're going to come in with the terrain paint and we're going to paint that all over it. And this will seal it and give it a good colour covering. So yeah, a link to how I make this is in the description below, but basically it's normal house paint mixed with PVA, water and a little bit of dish soap. So yeah, I'll get that all done. I'll speed it up, put some music on, stop talking, and then when it's dry, it'll be dry brushing, and this build will be complete, and we'll move on to the next one. And in the background I'm going to be making more of these, so I have a few different sizes, but they're all going to use exactly the same technique. So you'll see them at the end of the video. There's no point in showing you all that repetitiveness. So yeah, let's paint this. The next step is painting the mine. So we've painted it black, and that's been done. So the next step is to dry brush, first dark grey and then a lighter grey at the edges. Leave the inside of the mine entrances black. A dark brown wash can be applied along the bottom edge of each level to add a little colour and shading. So we'll do all of those things. First of all, I'm going to do the dark grey dry brush. Now I've picked up a new brush just from a local hardware store, and so I'm going to see how well this is, and I think it's going to be okay if it holds its bristles. It's a bit cheap. So I'll just go across now and dry brush using this over the entire model, but not inside the mine entrances. And I'll pop some music on and you can watch and see how this is going to transform the look very, very quickly. Well, there we are. That didn't take very long. 3 minutes including my preamble and a little bit of a mistake at the start, which you'll never hear. So yeah, I will now go along and come along with a lighter dry brush on the edges, and then that will be ready for the wash, and then it's done. That's a very nice quick build. Next up, I'm going to start on the mine workings, and I'm going to make each one that's on here because yeah, I think they can be really cool, and I might do some of my own design as well. First of all, we're going to do the work tower, and step one is the support posts. To make all of these wooden mine workings, you will need plenty of balsa wood. Thankfully, I had a huge delivery through very recently. Several sheets will do, along with a few small square rods of it. Now, I ordered round rods, but not square rods, which is a bit frustrating for me. However, I can always make that up out of thick sheets, which I've got here. Take one of the square rods and measure it against the height of one of the mine levels, which I've done with this, and as it happens, that width there is exactly the correct size to go up against one of my mine workings, not against the lowest level, but against the top two levels, which I'll do. And I might come and do some different ones for different sizes, but for now that's going to be fine. So what you now do is you cut that down and you make 4 lengths. So what I'm going to do is I have my sharp knife and I have my safety ruler, and I'm going to come along and slice off very, very carefully 4 lengths from this block. And the way to do this is gently, multiple shallow cuts, especially because I'm not being very careful, very sensible here, and I'm actually going against the grain. So multiple shallow cuts. Well, I didn't count how many that was, but it was quite a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the other 3 out, and I'll bring you along for the next step. Next step is cross beams. For the cross beams, you need 4 thick X's. Okay, crosses, yeah. Cut from the balsa sheet. To make these, first cut 4 squares from the sheet, each one of them the same height as one of the 4 balsa rods and approximately 3 centimeters in width. On one side of each, draw an X with a pencil so that the lines run from corner to corner. Then, as a guide, to make the X thicker, place a balsa rod along each side of the pencil line, and, using the rods as a ruler, draw a line on each side with your pencil. Repeat this with the other pencil lines. This should leave you with a thick X shape on the centre of the panel. Finally, carefully cut this X out with a craft knife so that the X is in a single piece. Repeat this for all 4 panels. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a different thickness of my balsa. There we are, we use that. And we know that the width of this is the height of my uprights, so we don't have to worry about that dimension. However, what we do need to worry about is the actual width. So it says around 3 centimeters. So let's get that measured. So we have centimeters there. I'm actually going to make it 4 because otherwise it will be a little odd. So I think 4 centimetres is going to be good, so we'll put a mark there, and we'll put a mark at the 4 centimetres at the top. And what I'll do is I'll do one again, and then I'll do the other ones off camera. So there we are, we have our 4 centimetre gap, and we'll cut that. Again, multiple shallow slices. There we are. So what we'll now do is grab a pencil and we will mark out, as it suggests, a cross on that, and I will use a different ruler as well. So we draw one line from each corner. There's one line, and then draw the other cross. And then we'll make use of that, and we'll draw a line like that, as it suggests, and then on the other side. Doing this a bit cack-handed. There we are. And then we'll do the other one. And that. And like that. And finally we will very, very carefully cut this out. Very carefully. So, again, using the safety ruler, I will offer that up against that line there and cut down. So this is actually going to be quite thick. It may be that I can make these cross pieces slightly smaller, but for now we'll stick with the instructions. So we'll cut that little triangle out. Like so, and save that because that may be used for something else. And then we'll cut this little triangle out here, and then we'll go around and we'll do the rest. And it occurs to me that I may be able to use this shape as a template and just replicate it across onto the sheet rather than having to do lots of measuring. So I might do that as well, and if I do I'll let you know. But I'll get 4 of these shapes cut out, and then when that's done I'll bring you back for the next step. I finished cutting out all 4, and I did use this first one as a template. And as you can see, despite all my caution, actually on the last one I managed to break it. So I wasn't going to do this gluing stage now because I have other things to get on with, but I think I am going to quickly put the glue together. So let's just talk through what's for step 3 of this build. Assembly. Put a dab of PVA glue on the top and bottom right corners of one of the X's, on the side with the pencil marks on it. Then glue one of the short rods in place so that each edge is attached to the corner. Do the same for the left hand side. Repeat this on another of the X's and wait for them both to dry. Finally, when these are dry, glue the other 2 X's in place to form a square frame. So I'm going to do that first stage on camera, and I'm going to glue the one that I broke, because that will be a good idea to make sure that it doesn't get lost. And I'm also just going to put a little bit of PVA on the end of this, just so that it will potentially make that joint a little more secure. So what we'll do is we will take one of our uprights, as you can see, and we will drop it down in place there. Okay, and then we will dab some more glue on this side and take another upright and drop it in place there. Just make sure that that goes up to the edge and not over it. So there we are. And then we will do the same on another X. So let's get this one here, which is the first one I drew, and put some glue on each of those corners. And you'll notice that I've done that wrong because I should have done that on the other side. So actually let's pick another one because that's got some glue on it. So you need to do it on the side that... Oh no, it is right. I'm sorry, I am tired. It's very early. I got up very early today, couldn't sleep again, and I'm starting to flag a little bit. So anyway, we'll come back to that later anyway. What we'll do is we'll stick those two down onto there, just make sure they butt up correctly, and then we'll let that dry, and then when that's dry I'll come and I'll glue them all together into a square. I'll bring you along for that as well, because why not? Doesn't take long to dry this. There we are. So we'll leave it like that, and then when we come back we'll put these X's on like that, and then we're done, apart from painting. These have dried now, and as you can see, even the broken one is okay. That's where the break was, so that's good. So what we're now going to do is get a little bit more PVA out and start to stick them together so that they stand up. And to do that, what we'll do is we'll sit one on its side, and we'll put some PVA here and here, and then we'll get another one and we'll do the same. So there and there. It really doesn't take very long to do this, it dries very fast. And then we'll get another X and we'll set it on there, making sure that it's nice and flush. And then we'll pull this up and we'll set it on there, like so. And then when that's dry, I'll turn it over and I'll do the other side, and then all we need to do is paint it. So I'll get that done and I'll bring you back and show you what it looks like when it's finished. So as you can see, I have painted some of this already because I started recording and my microphone was off. I'm an idiot. So what I'm doing is I'm painting this with raw umber, and that is just going to finish off this part of the build. I won't be able to do it all on camera because I need it to dry before I can put that edge down. So it'll probably take a couple of applications, but this is the final step for this part of the build. Next up is going to be the platform and the ladder which pairs up with this. So I will get the rest of the painting done that I can now, and then bring you along for the next part of the project, which is the ladder, as I say. Okay, so next up is step 4, which is the platform. To make the platform for the top of the work tower, start by cutting 2 strips of balsa wood from the sheet. Make them each about half a centimetre wide by 10 centimetres long. Next, cut a panel out of the balsa wood sheet. Make it about 8 centimetres, so about 2 centimetres shorter and just about 4 centimetres wide. Cut the panel across its width every centimetre, creating a series of planks. You do not have to be precise when creating these planks, as a slightly rough look helps to give them a realistic appearance. Glue the planks to the 2 strips you made, leaving a small gap between each plank. While the glue is still wet, use the X-frame as a guide to position the strips wide enough apart so that they will sit comfortably on top of the X-frame when the platform is finally glued in place. Once you've positioned the strips and the glue is dried, glue the platform to the top of the X-frame. Now I may or may not do the gluing the platform to the top of the X-frame. I may just have these as separate elements which can be positioned wherever I want. However, I'm going to follow the rest of the instructions. So I'm going to get my safety ruler and I'm going to basically make this again slightly longer. So this is going to be 15 centimetres long because my kit model is slightly bigger than what they've done. So we're going to cut 2 strips out of this, which is 15 centimetres long, and I can always trim it down if I want to. So I've got a strip there. There we are, and we'll do another strip. And then if you look at this, this is, if we go and get my partially painted platform, you can see that that's going to be a bit too wide. So what I'll do is measure that. Yeah, I did that 4 centimetres. So what I'll do is I'll come along and I'll do that at about 4.5 centimetres, so that we've got about 1/4 of a centimetre overhanging when we do it. So from 50, let's do it at 5 centimetres. Let's do it at 5 centimetres, better. So then we'll cut that down here. Oh. Try and do it accurately. There we are. And then what we'll do is we'll cut these into strips. So I'm not going to worry too much because I reckon I'll get use out of these in other parts of the build. So we'll just cut a strip across there and then we'll carry on with that. So Remember to do this in multiple passes, so you're not trying to go through in one go, because that's the best way to split balsa wood. There we are, that'll probably do. I can always cut a little bit more if I want to. And what we're then going to do is we're going to come in and we're just going to shave off the edges to make them a little bit rougher looking. So just take some liberties with your knife and make them look a little bit knackered, like so. So I'll get that done on all of these. Okay, so I did that then. So what I'm now going to do is the next step, but I'm first of all going to do a quick tidy up. So I'll just clean up and then I'll be back to glue them together. Right then, let's get this gluing done. So I've got some PVA, I've got my 2 planks. I'm going to position them, and I'm going to do this slightly smarter than what they suggest. So what I'm actually going to do is line them up. So I know this is the correct width, so I'm going to line them up down these lines. Okay, so that means that I should be able to just come in and run my PVA along the top of both, drop the planks on, weight it down so it doesn't bend, because this will warp with PVA, and then that should work, rather than to pick it up while it's still not wet and position it or what have you. Just offer it up while you're making it. A far better idea, I think. Okay, so we've got our PVA on. We've got it on the 2 lines that we want to follow roughly, and what we're going to do is we're going to come and we're going to drop our planks across. And what I'm actually going to do is have a broken one. So have half there, and then a whole one. Turn that around. It's better. And I've still got plenty of cross pieces, as you can see. So I'll put that one at the end, and then trim that down just to fit. Okay, so I'll leave that to dry now. And while that's drying, I'll continue painting the tower. So just to weight that down, I will simply get myself a metal plate and put it down over the top. There we are. So that will now not warp and dry nicely. So I'll let that go and I'll continue painting. As you can see, I've got the rest of this to do now, and then I'll bring you back for the next step when I get to it. As you can see, this is mostly dried, but there's a few bits of touching up to do, and I also need to paint the bridge, which I did. I'm still undecided whether I'm going to stick them together, but I don't need to decide just yet. So what I'm going to do is just come along and touch up the bits that aren't finished on the tower, and then I'll paint the bridge in the same way. And what you'll notice is that I put a little bit of reinforcement across. If you remember, I broke one of the little X's. I've made a benefit of that by putting in a crude looking and actually crude repair. So that will look quite nice and be in character and fitting for what we're looking for, because this is obviously Moria not at the height of its riches, but after it's been taken over by those nasty gobbos. So I'll get this painted up and then let it to dry, and then I'll get on to the next step. I'm going to need to go shopping at some point for this, because I need to get myself some chain. I keep forgetting. I was out today and I could have picked it up and I forgot. Anyway, quickly paint this and I'll bring you along for the next step shortly. Next up is ladders. Now I've just done some measuring and my ladders are going to be a little bit longer than they suggest, at initially 10 centimetres, and for the taller one I'm going to actually need to make them about 13 or 14 centimetres. So I'm going to make a couple. I've got myself my sheet of what's it here, of balsa, that's the word. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 2 lengths of 10 centimetres and 2 lengths of 14 centimetres. And they're going to be, again, about half a centimetre wide, maybe something like that, maybe a centimetre wide. So we'll get that marked up now. And this is going to be the uprights for the ladder. Okay, now we're going to cut those out very carefully. I will, as always, use a safety ruler. So now we've got the uprights for 2 ladders. What it then says, next cut 7 shorter lengths, about 3.5 centimetres. And what I'm thinking is that this actually is about 3.5 centimetres. So I've got 2 of my lengths there already, which is why I kind of decided to cut it to 10. And what it says to do is to get the gaps is to get 2 slaughter bases, which I have here, and position them so that the gap between, you can fit 2 bases in, because then your models, your miniatures will actually be propped up and be able to stand. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get some blue tack, and I'm going to blue tack 2 of these bases together, and then I'll be able to use that to get my gaps. So we would take the shorter of the 2, and we would put our first rung there, and then take this, and when that's glued, we would then be able to put our second rung there, for example. So that's the idea that they're coming up with. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to cut out a bunch of lengths of wood for the rungs, and then glue them in place. And I'll bring you along for the gluing, but I'm going to just skip over the cutting because it's going to be much of the same as what you've just seen. I have cut a load as described, about 3.5 centimetres wide, and I've also got the slightly narrower one, so I've got a little bit of a mix. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to glue them in place. And to do this, I am actually going to end up using super glue, because it's going to go off a little bit quicker and make it a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is put a dot of super glue there and put my first rung in, like that. And then using the lines on my cutting mat, which I can see even if you can't because it's very filthy, I will then be able to offer up and position the other side and make sure that it's going to stand flat, because while I don't really care about evenness of most of this, making sure that it's going to stand flat is quite important. So we'll line that up against that, line that up against that, and then just drop it in place. There we are. And what you can see there is that is plenty of space for me to slot my little figure in. So I will let that go off, because that's going to be what's going to make it structurally sound. And then once that's gone off, I will be coming along with my little guide here and offering it against each of the lower rungs and sliding the next rung in place, and then I'll build up and build up and build up. So I'll let that go off and I'll bring you along for the next step. Well, that only took a minute or so. So what we're now going to do is we're going to start to put in place the next pieces. So I'm going to do a shorter one here because, as I said, I've got a couple of odd sizes. So what we're going to do here is put a dot and put a dot. Plop that in place and then make sure that it's going to work with my little guide. There we are. And then we'll come along and do the next one. Starting to get an idea roughly of the distance already, as you can see. So we can put the guide in place, get the wood near the glue. I want to have them a little bit kind of wonky in places. Do this one a bit more wonky. My idea is that these are not left over from the dwarves. This is one made by a bunch of gobos. So I'm going to do this for the rest of this ladder, and also I'm going to do it for the taller ladder, and then I'm going to paint it in the same way, and then we'll have some ladders. So I will get that done. You'll see the end product when it's finished. And next up, I think we're going to be working on some other bits that might go in a mine. Next up, what we're going to do is walkways. So this is alternative other constructions in the modelling workshop. Walkways are simple to make. They're constructed in the same way as a platform on the work tower, only longer. Walkways can be used to join one section of mine to another, allowing the goblins to scuttle along without ever touching the ground. You could even add a handrail if you like, which is constructed using the same techniques as for fences, which is in pack 7. And then you paint it the same. So what I thought I'd do is just, in this build I'm not doing very much alternate, I'm not doing a big custom build for it, but what I'm going to do is show some different materials and some different techniques for making some of these things. Now for a long time I did not like balsa, I can't get it very easily here, so I didn't have very much experience. I'm now getting more and more comfortable and confident with it. However, I have used other methods for making these sorts of things in the past. So what you see here, these are actually from a sushi set. So they're the wooden influence from the sushi set. And what these are coffee stirrers. So I'm going to be making use of those materials, and what I've done is I'm just marking out a rough length of about between 5 and 6 centimetres. Again, I'm not doing my best to not be too regular in how I'm making these, and to cut them I'm just scoring it with my knife and then splitting it. Now I do have a chop it, which is just here on the edge, and I use the chop it to get the rounded ends off, because it's a little bit difficult to split something so short just with your hands. But once you've got them trimmed down like that, there's no point in using it. It's just as quick and easy, and actually you get a nice kind of broken end effect, which also I'm looking for when you do it a little bit manually, rather than it being such a accurate industrial looking cut that you get from the chop it. So I'm going to cut up a bunch of these to a good length, about 5 centimetres like I say, and then I'm going to glue them on. Again, in the same way as you've seen me do a number of times, they're going to go between these two lengths, and then it'll be painted. And I'm going to make myself a handrail, absolutely, and for that I'm going to make use of these. You can just use matchsticks. Obviously these are matchsticks with no end on, which I picked up at a hobby shop, and these are some of my oldest hobby supplies from Belgium. Still had these 5 years now, still not finished, and I'm going to make the top of the railing out of this round wood. So I'll get that chopped up, get it glued on, and I'll bring you along for those stages. But for now, it's just going to be quite a lot of cutting. Right, let's get some gluing done. As you can see, I've got the railing all stuck together, and I just did that by patience and a dab of super glue. And what I'm going to do now is a little more patience and a little more super glue. So I'm going to come along and I'm going to put a dab of super glue on the bottom of each of the legs, like so, and then I'm going to make use of my heavy squares that you can see in shot to keep it nice and propped up. So we'll put that in place like so, and then come in with another heavy square, and there we are. That now is upright. It is not very hard wearing though, so I'm a little concerned that I may come in with a bit better glue. After this is stuck first, I might come in and paint around the edges and make sure I've got some PVA and build it up a bit, because it's not all that secure. What might have been better might have been to have planned it more and had it in on the side. But anyway, there we are. That's the railing done. We'll leave that to dry. I'll let you know if I do make any more adjustments, but that now will go into the painting queue. What we have here is a long strip of thin, so 1/2 mm by 1/2 centimetre by 1 centimetre, so 5 by 10 mm roughly, pine, which you can buy in any hardware store. And my walkway, which is here, which is looking great, don't get me wrong, it's just not quite long enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this in half, and I'm going to make this in the same way using the coffee stirrers and maybe some slightly wider ones as well, just for variety. And I'm going to make a long walkway, because well, you know, you can't really have too long walkways, can you? So I'm going to get that done. It'll be the same technique. I just thought I'd show you the materials, and I'm also going to pick up the next final few builds and other constructions which I've got to do before I wrap this up. So yeah, I'll get this done now. So the next that I'm going to build is the steps. There is a mine cart, but I just don't want to build it, so I'm not going to. Steps are an alternative to ladders and look a bit more permanent. Cut the sides out of a flat piece of balsa wood, you can see here, and then glue battens on the sides that will be facing inwards. The steps will rest on these battens. Finally, glue the bottom of the steps onto a base so that it balances. If you want, you could add a handrail onto the steps. So we're going to do this. So the first thing I've done is I've found the height which I'm going to want it to go to. So it's 8 centimeters, which is the height of one of my levels. I may make some taller ones out of longer bits of balsa, but for now this is going to be fine. What you then want to do is you need to have the you need to measure out the sides. So it's going to be down to the corner. It's going to be slightly wider. It's just under 10 centimeters, and that means that the battens are going. So the steps are going to go here and here and here and here, roughly. Using this as a roughly 2 centimeters as a guide, what I can do is I can actually get both sides out of the same piece of balsa by marking 2 centimeters there, 2 centimeters there. It's a mirror, you see. And the final thing that I can do is I can also get my first steps, at least one set of my first steps, maybe more out of the spare, because the top little section is about 2 centimeters across, and so that's about wide enough. So if I mark that to there, be about wide enough, 5 centimeters ish, and that will be my steps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through on the rest of my balsa wood that I've got here. I'm going to mark that out for steps, cut them out. I might make a couple of these, and then I'll bring you along once I've got everything cut. The battens, I will just use offcuts of the balsa wood as well. So I'll bring you back when I've got everything cut and when I'm about to assemble. So now I'm looking at doing the supports, and it struck me that a really good idea would be to use these matchsticks, which I can glue across. So what I've done here is I've measured 2 centimeter gaps and 2 centimeter gaps and then lined it up across. And to make it easy to do the other side and make sure it matches, what you can do is you can just line them up and mark them off like so, to make sure that they actually do match. And then the other side like this, and then you'll be able to line between those to find out where your steps are going to go. So the next thing for me to do is to cut short lengths of the matchsticks and get them glued in place. So I'll do that. I'm probably just going to glue them with super glue so that it goes off quickly. I won't bother to film it because it's obvious. And maybe I'll just cut the first one on camera. Maybe that's done. So that's where they're going to go. So what we're going to do is they're going to want to be about 1.5 centimeters. So what I'll do is I'll get my sharp knife, offer it up at 1.5 or just over, just under, and then cut like that. Simple as that. So I'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 of those done, glue them in place, and I'll bring you back when I come to the next step. This next bit could get a little bit fiddly because what I'm going to try and do is stick on the actual steps. So we're going to use the super glue gel, and what we'll do is we'll run a bead down on top of each of these, and I'm going to do one side, let it set, and then join it to the other side. That's my plan anyway. We'll see if it works. So there we've run a bead of the super glue, and then what we'll do is we'll come in and hopefully these will stand up nicely and my big klutzy fingers won't knock them over, because that obviously is the risk. I will let that to go off, and then when that's gone off I will come along and I will attach the other side, because it should stay flexible enough for me to, even with the glue set, that should stay flexible enough for me to do it right. What I'm going to do now is measure up and cut out a base out of the same balsa wood, just so that we can, just so that I can actually glue that on as well, and then it will be stable. So there we are, we're nearly done. It is a very, very short while later. This has set nicely. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be gluing this to this base that I've cut. And what I've done is I've marked a centimetre in so I know where the front of it should go. And what I'm going to do is actually get something a little bit heavier than that blue foam, because I want to have something which it can actually basically back up against and act as a support while it's going off. So the first thing that we'll do is we will run a bead of PVA, of glue, and I've got some not super glue gel this time because it's going to go off a little bit quicker, so I'm going to run a little bit of PVA glue, sorry, super glue along the bottom, not that much, drop it on my hand, that was careless. A little bit of super glue along the bottom and then put it in place. And that's the first thing I'm going to do. Oh, and there go the puppies outside. So with that in place, and well, that's simple enough. With that in place and secure, what I can now do is the same thing with the other side. So I can run my bead of glue along the top of each of the steps, and then we can slide that in and hopefully get each of these steps to marry up nicely if I've measured it right and cut it right, and if I haven't it will look terrible. It's okay. So yeah, I'm going like that. And I hasten to add that what I will be doing is, once this is set with super glue, is I will come along with PVA and reinforce it. So this is merely to hold it in place. So let's just get that to set. It's not perfect, it's not terrible. I've done better jobs in my life. But this sort of accuracy is not something that I'm normally good at. And this is proving the case again. Right, I may need to just step away from that, let that go off, and then come in with the PVA to reinforce it. So anyway, there we are. I think that's going to be okay. I will just adjust the camera slightly. I was trying to get that as close as possible. That will now go off. I'll put some PVA on it to reinforce it, and then it'll be time for painting. Next and finally for this build is the crane. To haul heavy equipment and minerals between the levels, dwarves use cranes. The frame for the crane is made from a series of balsa wood rods. They are cut at angles so that it can lean over the edge of a level. A flat base gives the frame some balance and stability. The chain is a cheap jewellery chain bought from an arts and crafts store. It can be cut to length using clippers. Now this is going to be the most challenging and probably the most fun. I have a chain here which I could not find a cheap jewellery chain at a cheap store, so Angela very nicely, very kindly donated it to me from some jewellery that she doesn't have any use for at the moment, and I will be ordering a replacement for her. I am not going to talk through this as such. What I'm going to do is do voiceover, because I'm not totally sure how I'm going to do it. I've got some ideas and I don't want to and ah and change my mind all the time while you're watching. So I'm going to run the camera and pop some music on, and I'll bob in and out with voiceover when I get to something which I want to explain. So I hope that you enjoy this slightly different way of filming. So first of all, I've got my chop it, which I begin using but then I don't use very much actually. And what I'm trying to do is work out some angles for the overhang. This is an example of me faffing around and probably making some mistakes. First of all, I'm going to just chop off the actual sulphur at the end. And then I'm going to try and work out what angles I want to do it at. I do end up getting it right. The angle I'm doing now ends up being good enough for the back. But yeah, this is a little bit of a waste of time. So I'll pop some music on and I'll be back when there's something else to add. What you can see here is that I'm pushing back the chop it because I don't really need it. It's a great tool, but yeah, you can get by with just a sharp knife. So I've got these tongue depressors that I picked up. They're a little thinner than the ones I got in Belgium that I've used up till now, but they still do quite well. And my plan here is to create the base for the actual for the crane, and the idea is I'm going to use these tongue depressors, cut them and stick them together, bind them together with lengths of the matchsticks. So yeah, I will let you watch this very carefully, scoring out where the cut's going to go, and then I'll split it by lifting, and I'll get that going over and over again. It's just easier doing it this way than it is with the chop it. I'm working out the width by offering up the width of the actual frame that I'm going to make, and then making sure that it's wider. So yeah, I will carry on with this and be back when there's something else to add. Now that I've finished cutting the planks, I'm going to join them together by gluing on some matchsticks underneath. So I'll chop the sulphur off and then glue these in place. The next item to make is the actual frame. So I've got 2 lengths of matchstick, the long ones, and I've got some shorter matchsticks, which I'm going to very carefully, as you can see, position, and then I'll be gluing them together using 1 cross piece and then some diagonals as well to add strength. I left that a while, now it's dry, so I'm going to very carefully glue it to my base. I'm going to make use of the blue foam there to try to help me get the angle right. So a bit of super glue, a bit of patience, and quite a lot of prayers. Against all the odds, that worked. So now we've got a leaning over crane. What I'm going to do now is glue on the uprights, and by this point I've really started to enjoy myself. I've surprised myself by how much I enjoyed this construction, and it just goes to show that just because you're nervous or something, give it a go, because it could be that you end up finding that you love it, and that's what happened here. So yes, I'm going to be trying to, I am going to be succeeded in what you can see there, which is chopping down and fitting in the other angled uprights to act as further support. Now I'm going to add a little bit more bracing. So I've got some smaller matchsticks, which I'm going to glue from the bottom of the more upright uprights to join across to the leaning over bit, my lovely technical terms. So let's get this done. Last but not least is a little bit of a crazy idea that I had, which actually ended up working, surprisingly. So I needed something, a crank around which my chain was going to be able to actually wrap. I didn't want it to be square because that doesn't look right. So what I'm doing is I'm taking some matchsticks, chopping them up, using the bradawl to put a little hole in them, and then when I've got 2 of them, I'm going to be able to put the cocktail stick between the 2 small matchsticks, and then it will look like it is actually going to be crankable. Now you can see that I made a mistake and had to do this a few times, but yeah, just a little touch to make it look a little bit more realistic. That was a whole lot of fun, a whole lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be really difficult and really stressful, but I really enjoyed making that. So what I'm now going to be doing is painting it using the same paint, which is the Winsor & Newton raw umber here. And then I will probably stick some stones, stones at the base of this, just to both reinforce it and to make it look like they've reinforced it. And then when that's done, I will then put the chain in place, wrap it around this spindle over the edge there, maybe with a little guide, and then done. So I'm going to get that painted. I just wanted to wrap up now before I do the voiceover later, and just say how much fun I had. I was just about to declare this done, all bar the dry brushing of the wooden parts, and I remembered I was planning on putting a support underneath the end of this. Now this is one of the ones that I've made not on camera, just as a little bit more of an interesting one. So it's got an underneath, and it's obviously got the thing at the top. And what I was planning on doing was using some balsa wood like this to create, oh sorry for the noise, to create a support underneath. So put some wood on the top with a T, and then glue that on. So that's what I'm going to do. First of all, I'm going to split down this bit of wood here to make it into a suitable kind of like cross piece. So we'll score it across as I do, and then split it. There we are. And then that can then get glued on there, and then that can then be glued underneath. Now the interesting challenge here is going to be getting this cut to the correct length. So let me just grab a ruler. So here we are. What we can do is I can hold that flat, and then once that's glued in place, which I'll probably do a little bit haphazardly, I will then be able to offer that up, cut it right and glue it in place. So I'll do that all off camera because it'll be a bit easier, but that's how I'm going to do it, using the flat of the ruler to work out exactly where to cut. Once I've got that cut, I'll paint it, glue it in place, and then I'll bring you back for the next step, which is going to be dry brushing all of the wooden items I've made. So now it's time for the dry brushing of the wood. Now what I've got here is a paint which is called Africa, and it's a pinky beigey colour. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush it on very lightly over the top of all of the wooden things, like this, just to bring out the edges. A very, very light dry brush. Using my nice dry brush that I got from the local hardware store. So yes, I'm going to do that on all of them. So I won't run the camera for the whole thing, I'll just show you this one. But that's really going to bring out the edges nicely and just give a little bit of nice variation to the wood over the kind of little bit samey brown that I had before. So there we are, doesn't that look lovely? This is one of the problems with using balsa. I'm terrified of breaking it. However, look at how nicely that's coming out now. Really giving a good depth to the carving that I did and to the damage that I put onto these sections of wood. And then finally we'll do the bottom, and I'll do the rest off camera. We'll get this one done. There we are. Very nice. Right, rushing towards the end now, which is good. I'm looking forward to next month's even. Don't do it once a week anymore, do I? Or once a fortnight. There we are. So, one dry brush. Let's get the rest done. With the dry brushing done, now the absolute final bit, which is attaching my chain. Now I'm not totally sure how much I'm going to use, so I'm not going to snip it just yet to any length. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to basically glue it in place, just the first section, like this. I'm going to put a dab of super glue, let that go off. And then when that's done, what I'll do is I'll wind the rest of it around from that strong fixed point, and eventually it will come and it will dangle over the edge, and then at that point I'll know exactly how much I want, and then I'll be able to measure it. So the first thing to do is to put a dab of super glue on the chain here and let that go off. And then when that's gone off, what I'll do, as I say, is wind it round, cut the end, and then I'll be done. So yeah, I think that is it. I think it is finally done. So I will see you for the grand display of it all together in a very short while in your time, and probably tomorrow in mine. I thought I was done then, and I was. This is the Sunday before I'm going to publish. And I remembered that I was going to do some more scatter terrain, and I thought, you know what, I've got time to do this. I'm going to show you how to make scatter terrain in a day. It's midday, it's just before lunch, and I aim to have this totally completed by the end of the day. And then I can take the photographs and get the video edited and published in time for Tuesday. So there we are. This is going to be interesting on two levels. One, can I do it? And two, is it going to look good? So what we're going to be doing is making some scatter terrain which we'll be able to put around the put around the table when you're playing Moria, which isn't going to be quite as big as the terrain that you've seen me make so far. Just going to be putting it onto CDs. Now, CD-based terrain is something that a lot of people do, I know. I don't pretend this is something which I'm making up, but I really like it. I've done it a lot in the past, haven't done it for a while, and it's going to be really good to get this done. So what I'm going to do is get these CDRs. Actually there's a DVD-R there, which I bought and came from somewhere. Don't make use of them really anywhere else. There's actually 3. Let me just pan a little bit to be a bit of a better shot. There we are, that's got all of them on shot now. So I've got my hot glue gun, my cool hot glue gun heating up, and this is how I'm going to be doing it. And in the background what you can see is a couple of different grades of builder's sand, and then the stuff that I pick up from the backyard, which is very, very mixed. And what I'm going to do, very simply at this stage, for these 3, is take my hot glue gun, which hopefully now, in the time I've been nattering, has warmed up. It has. And I'm going to basically start to build up a layer of hot glue and of sand and gravel. So we'll put a lump in like this. And then, as simple as this is, I'm just going to dunk it in. And there we are. Now, what I've just realised I've forgotten, and I'm leaving this in, I realised this before I shot that, is that I haven't filled the hole. And so what you've got there is a hole in the middle. Now there's 2 ways we could go about fixing this, and I'll show you one right away, and then I'll go and get the correct tools and come back in a second and fix the other one. But to fix that now, if you can't be bothered with going and getting any masking tape or whatever, just dig out a relatively large stone, hot glue around the outside of the hole, and drop the stone on. And there we are. We no longer have a hole. What I'm now going to do is go and grab my masking tape and show you the other way of resolving that mistake. One problem with having everything out in the corridor while I still haven't brought it back inside the room 13 is that I don't have things to hand, so I can't just grab things on the fly. But what you can see we do here is we simply use our masking tape to cover over the hole. Now we can hot glue everywhere, and it's as simple as that. So there's 2 ways there of dealing with the hole in the middle. I need to get another hot glue stick. I will now pop some music on and get the rest of these done with the combination of sizes of gravel that I've got, and I will let you watch, and you can see the next step when I get to it. So there you are. That was a learning experience for me as well. Put small amounts of hot glue on, not large amounts, otherwise it goes off. Certainly this cool stuff. And also it looks to me like the sifted gravel is going to work better than this. However, it's just going to look different, and I'm actually quite pleased with that. So what I'm going to do is let that totally go off. And then I'm not going to film this next bit, but I'm going to go and I've got some black car primer, and I'm going to go and prime those. So I'm going to paint them with the black car primer now, just with the spray can. So I'll get that done, and then when that's done, I'll bring you back for the next and final step. So it's a bit later on in the day, and I've sprayed these black. Now, the one that I did with the sifted sand is looking pretty good, but the other 2 are a little bit kind of not very good at all. They're not really stuck as I want them to. So what I'm going to do, this might delay me a little bit, but I'm going to come along and I'm going to put my terrain paint, my black terrain paint all over, which is mixed with PVA, and so that should help to adhere the stuff that isn't adhering as much as I want it to right now. And while it might take a little bit longer to go off, so maybe I won't finish it entirely today, I will finish this one, I won't finish these 2 today, it should give me a better result. And the lesson here is I should have done these when I meant to and not forgotten to start them, which is why the only reason I'm in a hurry now. Because it is a very quick technique. I just tried to cut some corners. So we're going to slap some terrain paint all over these and then leave them to dry. As you can see, it's not really sticking very well at the moment. A little bit of PVA and that will be fine. And I've got PVA in this terrain paint, so that should glue it down. So yeah, let them to dry. And in a short while I'll come along and I'll do the next stage just on this one here, so at least you can see that this is doable in a very short while. I just yeah, the non-sifted has too many tiny particles, and therefore it's very, very hard to stick, which is something I'm learning. So the next step is with my darker of the two greys, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come across with a wet brush, and not a very heavily loaded wet brush, but I'm just going to look to apply a coloration of grey wash to this pile of dirt. So yeah, we'll get that done. Now what I might do after this, I might come along with some PVA, put some sand, paint it again. As is obvious, this is a very last minute addition to the video, and just trying to give you an impression really. But yeah, so that's how the next step is, just to apply the grey so that the black is in the depths, but most of the rock is actually grey, just like that. So when that's dry, we'll come along with the dry brush of the lighter grey, and then we'll be done. Oh, welcome to my kitchen floor. How about some floor hammer? Here it is, all set up and looking absolutely brilliant. You can see that I've managed to get the small pieces of scattered terrain done as well. They could be done a lot better, but they've turned out all right. It's only this one here. My grey dry brush was a little bit too wet, and so that's gone a bit splodgy, but I can surely fix that, as I explained when I was making it. But the rest of it is looking brilliant. You can see that we have some ladders, which means you can get up. Here we've got the little kind of like crane thing that I made and had so much fun. Another ladder here. We've got a bridge here with a little handle on it. And we've got a longer bridge going across here, and yeah, I mean it's a really varied and interesting looking set of terrain, and it was actually really, really easy to make. So I hope that you've enjoyed that. I hope that's given you some inspiration, and maybe you'll go away and make some of this yourself. Please do let me know if you do. That'd be awesome to hear. Yeah, while it has been a slightly simpler build, I certainly have enjoyed it a lot, and I'm really pleased to have got it done. So yeah, I'll now go to the closeout, and then we'll take some detailed photographs, and yeah, so we've managed to do it. Well, there we are, another Battle Games in Middle-earth video completed. I'm really pleased. It was a fun build. I'm really glad that it was a little bit of a lighter build than the last couple, because it's just been nice to have a little bit of a rest. However, next month it comes back and it hits with a bang, because next month we're hitting Barlin's Tomb, and in the next 4 weeks I've got to build it all. Now, those of you who've been following me for a little while will have seen some of the earlier vlogs, and will have seen that I made an attempt at Barlin's Tomb, and frankly it failed really badly. So while I'm really looking forward to this, it's basically my favourite scenario in the entirety of the Middle-earth strategy battle game, and I cannot wait to get a game on my new terrain when I do it, because I'll do it properly this time. I'm also a little bit nervous because I've failed once already to make this as it was in my head, so yeah, let's see whether I can achieve it this time. Anyway, let's get some pictures after this little kind of out blurb. You can see some more detailed pictures of what I created, and I hope that it has inspired you. Maybe you're going to give this a go yourself. Please let me know in the comments. I love to hear from you as always. And I will wrap up by saying, as I always do, please stay healthy, stay safe, and stay well.